The Panthers needed a last-second goal against the Boston Bruins in order to get a point, but it's a performance that the Panthers should be encouraged by. And tonight begins a stretch of 8 games in 14 nights.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, January 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. You can also follow the show account on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on the show to talk everything in the world of the Cats, and even in a performance on Saturday afternoon where the Florida Panthers dropped to the Boston Bruins by a final score of 4-3 in overtime on a last-second goal by David Pastrnak on the power play. The Panthers outshot the Bruins 43-18 on the afternoon, even went stretches of the game where they had 9 straight shots on goal in between the first and the second, 3 straight penalty kills. The Panthers did not allow a shot. The first PK that they went on, 1 shot by Boston, ended up in the back of the net. And despite the Panthers never leading in this game, it was a back and forth affair. It was never a multi-goal lead by the Boston Bruins. The Panthers truly put the hammer on the Bruins, having them pinned in their own zone, getting in Swayman's kitchen, frustrating to the point where he provided a headshot to Sam Reinhart at one point in the beginning of the game. And for Florida, just consistently getting in on their forecheck and connecting on their breakout passes. But it was mostly for the Boston Bruins just getting the scores on some broken plays. I mean, some sticks were getting in the way from passing lanes, and sometimes a loose puck just ends up in the back of your net, as we saw with the overtime winner for the Boston Bruins, and also on another attempt from going high to low, and the puck ended up near Sergei Bobrovsky, and then they punch it in for one of the goals as well. Although, once again, like I said, 2 power play goals against for the Panthers, but got to be very encouraged by the penalty kill for the Cats, especially Gustav Forsling, on just how they were able to keep them so perimeter based, have them overthinking for them. And you know, when you're 4-on-3 in the overtime period, it's going to be a little difficult with the open ice for them. But the Panthers gave themselves every opportunity to win, and this was a game mostly filled with last second goals, not only just on the 1 to force overtime in the game winner, but even Evan Rodriguez getting his first goal in 16 games with the second left on the power play, and it was power play 2 who got it going for the Panthers. And I mean, to think that the Panthers are also doing this without Aaron Ekblad, who missed Saturday's game. We'll get more on Aaron Ekblad later, and even missed the game in Colorado. We've seen really truly how the power play has struggled without him in the lineup. So we are also seeing Aaron Ekblad's true value, as much as we like to pick on him. But when he's out of the lineup, I mean, it's really telling how thin this D-court is for the Cats here. And I mean, again, you play this game 9 times out of 10, you're going to come up on the winning side most of the time. And this was the one time out of the 10 that I felt that the Panthers would be on the losing end of this. Jeremy Swayman was just outstanding for them. So got to tip our hat and give credit where credit is due there. But if there was the amount of holding calls for the Panthers also in this game, I mean, the amount of stick infractions and just getting out of position, the Panthers really truly didn't helped themselves in that category. I mean, Etug went to the box twice, Lundell once in this one, but also other what you like about a result like this when you get a point, and even though the Panthers put on a dominant effort, is just the amount of the newcomers for the Panthers getting in on the post whistle stuff and the shenanigans outside of that. I mean, Nate Schmidt and Brad Marchand tangled up near the crease, and to think that Nate Schmidt went to the box when Brad Marchand removed his helmet, that was a little shocking to me. And then AJ Greer uh, taking on 3 Bruins after the whistle in the same post whistle scrum. He ends up getting a double minor there for roughing, but also it's 3 straight games, even though it didn't go down as a fight statistically for AJ Greer. You saw that happen in the first 2 matchups for AJ Greer against the Bruins, and then getting in once again to think that doing that against his former team as well for him, and just the amount of hatred that he is putting on for a team in the Boston Bruins that has been eliminated by the Florida Panthers in these last 2 postseasons for them. But Panthers went in trailing in the third. Even Mark Messier was starting to talk about how he felt like the Bruins were just surviving going into the third, and to think that the Panthers only 1 win on the season when trailing going into the third period, which was that 1 game in Edmonton, to think that the Panthers really truly were getting in on their forecheck and the Bruins having a hard time connecting on their breakouts. The Panthers really put the pressure on, and the the going back to the Evan Rodriguez goal, got to give credit to Uvis Balinskis on throwing it to the net, and for Evan Rodriguez to fight for it to get in the back of the net. And I mean, to think that the Panthers made their push, and to think that they ended up on the losing end of things, this is where you go process over results in this part of the season. It's been a while since I've used that term on the show. And I go back to a few things. I go back to a January matchup against the same Boston Bruins, where the Panthers made a comeback in the final seconds with Sasha Barkov scoring and a rare celly from him with a fist bump, and then Sam Reinhart scoring shortly after, in maybe like 30 seconds into the overtime period, and they end up on the winning side right before the All-Star break. And then before that, the Panthers welcomed the New York Rangers to town in the very first game of 2023. It was against Yaroslav Halak for the Rangers. The Panthers lose, but Paul Maurice talks about liking the last 40 minutes for the Panthers, even though they were on the losing end. And the Panthers at the time were 9 points behind the final wild card spot. And even then, Paul Maurice was talking about, I liked how we look. I like how I like the structure in with that we are playing in. And I'm just paraphrasing there for Paul Maurice there, but it was just another sense of liking what you see, but but the scoreboard not necessarily reflecting it. Sam Reinhart, although he had a poor breakout for the Panthers on the OT winner by Pasternak, 3 goals in the last 2 games, and 11 shots on goal. Maybe he's gripping the stick a little bit too tight on that one power play where he broke his stick twice, and was asked a pretty awkward question by Emily Kaplan about doing something different regarding his sticks, and he just gave 1 or 2 words and then just left it alone, and there was like a little bit of an awkward silence there. But 11 shots on goal and 3 goals in the last 2 games. This was the stretch last year at this time where Sam Reinhart was getting those 8 straight games of at least a special teams goal. So this is around the time where he started to heat up. So it looks like it's starting to get there again. And although Sam Bennett has struggled in the faceoff dot this season, all 3 centers for the Panthers were over 57% on their draws. So when you look at the center depth of the Panthers versus the center depth of the Bruins, give me another 7 games of this, because once again, the Panthers so much stronger than Boston down the middle, and just driving play for them that I believe that we saw Panthers defeat the Bruins in 7. We saw them defeat the Bruins in 6 last year. I don't at this rate with the lack of depth. I mean, you also think about it. The Bruins, I think they're missing Jake DeBrusk a lot this season on a guy who could score from the wing for them. I think that's a piece that's truly missing for them. That wasn't the best relationship with the coaching staff, Don Sweeney, and at the time Bruce Cassidy, even before Jim Montgomery, but they still found a way to get through the last 2 years of the contract after he got a short extension. But once again, the depth between the Panthers and the Bruins is just night and day when it comes to the centers for these two teams here. But coming up, the Florida Panthers got their first 6-on-5 goal of the season, and we're going to provide more stats on the Panthers' dominance on Saturday afternoon against the Boston Bruins. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, January 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. And to discuss more about just the game in general for the Panthers, I mean, we spoke about 43-16 for the Panthers. I mean, all the goals that they gave up on Saturday, I mean, none of them were off breakaways. The Panthers were really they weren't really giving up too many breakaways until the very end where they were starting to push. I mean, at that time, I remember 2 straight breakaways from David Pastrnak that he tried to go 5-hole with Sergei Bobrovsky, and that was closed. But the one where Wahlstrom got behind the D before they tied it, that one I had maybe a little bit of an issue with because it was just a minute right after the Panthers tied it, and then the first Pasta goal. You're gonna have a hard time when there's a battle in the corner, and then David Pastrnak's coming with speed. But he did recognize that it was Dmitry Kulikov there and not Gustav Forsling, so a hard player to contain there. And I hear the argument on X and different platforms about how the Panthers were lucky to get a point, but I'd argue that the Panthers earned the point. And yes, last second goals get magnified a little bit whenever those do happen, but you just felt that it was just coming for them and that they were going to get it. It just ended up being in the last 2 seconds left in regulation, and it truly manifested. And if you were just waiting for the levee to break, I mean, Boston icing it 9 times in the third period. Panthers won, draw, iced again, hanging on for dear life. And usually when you break out of a long losing streak that the Boston Bruins did on Saturday, it's a performance that comes possibly in a little bit of dominance. Yes, it's one that they could feel confident about. Yes, I understand it, but the Bruins barely hung on this one. Yeah, good for David Pastrnak. We spoke about him struggling with not even getting 20 goals on the season for him, on pace for about 30, and then he gets 2 goals on the night. But him and Marchand carrying the load. And to think, after we recorded our Friday show, there was a media availability that Brad Marchand had about potential rift between him and David Pastrnak, and then Marchand putting cold water on that, trying to put out a possible fire, because obviously there's discussion about everything that's going on in Vancouver with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, but then now another report, because they're losing, there's discussion about rift between David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand, and then Marchand talking about how they're not on the same line because they want to spread out the depth, which honestly I believe that. Honestly, but again, if you're Florida, you're confident once again if you have a series between the 2 teams, and could have it's just a bit of a bummer that this was denied of a shootout where obviously when 40% of the of the overtime period is spent on the PK, it's hard to actually kill that penalty and actually to force the, the shootout there. So it just you thought that there was a few seconds left, but when you think that that it's going to get to that next period or to the shootout, gets denied. I mean, to think that even Sam Reinhart with the puck floating and then the Bruins unable to clear, that goes in, and just it's a little bit of a shocker. But at the same time, like I said, it just happened to be in the last two for the Panthers get that game tying goal for them. But Jamison Olive did provide a few stats for the Panthers and their dominance on Saturday afternoon for them. Led 109 to 37 in shot attempts, 56 to 18 in scoring chances, and 23 to 6 in high danger shot attempts. Even Evan Rodriguez spoke after the game saying, quote, "I think that's the best game we've played in quite some time. You want the result, you want the 2 points, but that's not what we're hanging our heads on." Close quote. Helps that the Toronto Maple Leafs also lost to the Vancouver Canucks on Saturday night. So Panthers 3 games back and a game in hand. So good position. By the way, first 6-on-5 goal of the season. There was a small list that the Panthers were a part of before Saturday, so that was their first. And the Panthers are going to be the lowest in the league in that category, regardless of whether they scored on that or not, because of the fact that 2/3 of their games they're going in with a lead or tied in the final frame. And this was the first time in the last 5 games that they allowed 4 goals. We spoke about the goaltending coming together, giving them a chance to win, but the scoring being a little bit dry for the Panthers. And it hasn't fully come together at the same time. But you see little bits and pieces of it for the Panthers, where yes, you saw someone break out of a drought like Sam Reinhart, now 3 goals in the last 2 games. And for it's been for the Panthers, again, trying to once again see the little things that they're doing in their play that they are doing right. And to think that in the last few games, in the last 5, the Panthers, they kept themselves in games, even in one game where they weren't necessarily playing their best, in the Carolina game where Paul Maurice decides to give it to his team on the bench. They were controlling play. You still found yourself tied going into the third period before they scored twice in the final 6. Colorado, the same thing. Without Aaron Ekblad, 1-1 game, and they scored before 11 with 11 minutes to go. You're still in these tightly contested games, and giving yourself a chance even when you're not playing your best. Yeah, they're not blowing teams out early, with the exceptions of Nashville earlier this season, but the team is not fully disengaging. That's the thing that the Panthers are not doing. And the only games where I felt like they were fully disengaged, and to think that the Panthers have played 43 games, only not even a handful of times where I could name that the Panthers have been disengaged. One of them was against Montreal, and then last month against the Philadelphia Flyers on December 5th, where the Panthers got out to a 3-0 lead, even a 4-1 lead, and they took their foot off the gas, and there was a little bit of that comeback for the Flyers, and the Panthers ended up winning it for them. But again, it's been rare where the Panthers have really had their foot on the opponent's throat. It's not every day where you're going to see a game like they did against the Nashville Predators. Although they were blown out by Tampa Bay with the first 3 goals in the first 10 minutes, thankfully the knee-on-knee collision that Nikita Kucherov had on Matthew Tkachuk created a spark for the team. And again, go back to the episode that we recorded with Alex Krutchuk. There's a point that we forgot what the score was because of how engaged the Panthers were in the game. Gave themselves plenty of chances to get it past Jonas Johansson at the time. but just had no answers. And again, that at the time the Panthers were, I felt that they were out of gas. And again, I can't use the term coasting for this Panthers team, where again you see a Saturday afternoon, you are the spotlight of not only the NHL but the sports world. It was the appetizer for wild card weekend, but at the same time in the NHL world, that was the only NHL game on at the time. So all eyes were on the Panthers here, and to think that it's a matchup of a team that they faced off against in the playoffs, the Panthers were wide awake and they were engaged too. And this is what it's really about when you get to this point of the season, to continue that engagement and to know that the you're more than to the halfway point. I'm sure the Panthers are not necessarily counting days, but emotionally in their heads, they're thinking, okay, uh, get through this part healthy, create the good habits, uh, no trust the system, and then okay, and now look at that next step into the progression of this season, whenever the team does add their fair share of additions at the trade deadline for them. So that's really what, once again, this is going to be about for the Panthers. As you know, you don't want to see alternating wins and losses for this team that just came off a Stanley Cup championship, but you're not seeing this team teeter in the wrong direction. That's the great thing about it. Not going in the wrong direction. No winning streak right now. No losing streak neither. Just win, loss, win, loss, for this team. So you're getting you're getting a team that's still more than just in the mix, but a team that hasn't lost focus is what I'm saying here. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where the Panthers will be visiting the Philadelphia Flyers in the third and final matchup of their season series. We're going to preview that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions I didn't realize I was still paying for. Rocket Money made it easy for me to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscription, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 50 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Third and final segment here on this Monday, January 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So Panthers at Flyers tonight at 7 p.m. from Wells Fargo Center. I'm going to assume morning skate won't happen until 11:30 for the Panthers today. I'm going to assume that Spencer Knight will be between the pipes for them to give Bob that regular rotation of a Saturday game, and then the usual 2-day gap in between a Saturday game and a game on Tuesday. So they're going to keep that same rotation, I would assume. It would only make sense for the Panthers there. But Aaron Ekblad and Jonah Gadjovich will not travel with the team on the road trip and will be reevaluated when they return from there. Just over the weekend, drama in Philadelphia with Cutter Gauthier making his return to Philadelphia. I mean, he never made his debut for the Flyers, but he was a top 5 pick for them. World Junior Hero for Team USA in the 2023-24 tournament. And then after was traded because the Flyers management said that they weren't gonna put him in the NHL right away if he were to sign his entry-level deal. Ended up not talking to him, shutting down the communication, and it forced a trade to Anaheim. A parade of boos on Saturday for Cutter Gauthier, and security They even had to confiscate, signs of anything related to Cutter Gauthier upon entry. So that's how hostile that environment got, and some bleep you Cutter chants going on there as well. And the best part of the night after that win for the Flyers there, which they won 6-0 against Anaheim, was them putting up Jamie Drysdale, who they got in the trade, in a photo of the final score graphic there. So just hilarious by the social media team of the Flyers there. But since the last two met on December 5th, the Flyers are 6-9-2 and 4-5-1 in their last 10. Have fallen off a little bit for them. We've spoken about how quiet some of the stars have been for the Panthers, like a Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe on the offensive end. All got on the score sheet last go round against the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's a good thing about, going into a matchup that these guys have succeeded in recently for them. It's gonna come down to getting into the kitchen of Samuel Ersson, assuming that he's the starter. 7th worst in the league in goals saved above expected. But also, this isn't, although their penalty kill is 17th in the NHL, it's a unit that is pretty dangerous. Especially a guy like Travis Konechny, who was just behind Sam Reinhart in shorthanded goals last season. Those two, him and Scott Lawton, are two penalty kill forwards who can get their sticks in lanes and go up with speed. And even one of the guys who doesn't play any penalty kill minutes for the Philadelphia Flyers, in Owen Tippett, former Panther, we know that he could come up with speed. I mean, in the two matchups that he's played against the Panthers, he's been outstanding. No goals in the first matchup, but 7 shots on net for Owen Tippett. Second matchup, 2 goals on breakaways, both coming off the Panthers attempting to stretch the puck out. One of them was out of the D zone. The other one was in the neutral zone. Both of them assisted by Matvei Michkov. So puck support is going to be important for the Panthers as a key for tonight for as the young Flyers have their fair share of speed. And speaking of Matvei Michkov, got an assist, like I said, in both of the Tippett goals, but was fallen off a little bit as far as his offensive production is still there, but just getting scored on quite a bit when he's on the ice for them. Obviously, what the scouting report for him is just a guy who's a pure shooter, doesn't really have that defensive part of his game, but the only Flyer in that stretch in double digits in the minus category since December 5th, and only one as well who have 20 minutes of penalties since these two teams last met. So a little bit of a rookie wall has hit Matvei Michkov, and the conversation of the Calder. The conversation, if you guys don't listen to any national podcasts, the conversation from what I've heard about the Calder race, now it's just been Macklin Celebrini and Leighton Hudson. Matvei Michkov is not much of a conversation lately for that trophy for him. So maybe a little bit of a struggle for him lately. So usually in these matchups, I look for what possibly the Panthers could trade for, and Philly only really has one notable UFA, and it's 36-year-old Eric Johnson, number 1 overall pick from 2006 and Stanley Cup champion, but 36 years old, like I said, and it's not a trade that I'd make only for the Panthers to scratch him. And a few RFAs that the Philadelphia Flyers have on their on their roster is one of them happens to be Morgan Frost, who, if they decide to promote Anton Lundell, maybe that's a piece that the Panthers could go for. But I think that's more of an offseason move if the Bill Zito was to make that trade. Morgan Frost does come cheap, but it's what you'd have to give up for an RFA right now for the Panthers when they have to work on the defensive depth for them. That's something maybe I could see him Zito circling back. Another RFA is Cam York a little bit undersized defenseman, 6'0" for him, and not a right-handed shot, which is what the Panthers are possibly going after here. We mentioned someone like Henry Okiharu, which also, according to Kirby Loophole of the Cats and Rats podcast, when Nick Fairbanks and I joined the show last week, one of the players that the Panthers are also in on is Buffalo Sabres defenseman Bowen Byram, Stanley Cup champion, former top 5 pick, has struggled with his fair share of head injuries and even considered retiring at one point. He's an RFA, but that's going to require a high price for the Panthers, as Buffalo has paid their other defensemen, Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin, and for there just doesn't seem to be room in the lineup for Byram, but the Panthers are also reportedly in on him. So that is so those are a little bit of the defense market for the Panthers currently on what they are looking for to shore up everything, because now we're seeing how thin it is without Aaron Ekblad at this moment in time for the Panthers, and just to beef up a little bit that top 4 in order to get them playoff ready. Zito's going to make his phone calls, and to get some of these guys to squeeze them in under their cap. The RFAs don't have really too much leverage here, at least right now. They will in the offseason more, but it doesn't seem like that this would be something in season that the Panthers would make, as far as someone like a Cam York. Yeah, they were able to get Sam Bennett when he was an RFA as a forward, but the price tag for Bennett was a lot lower than it was right now, and to think that the Panthers even got that done while dealing with a flat cap on a 4-year deal for Bennett is just outstanding, along with the elevation in play when he was playing wing in Calgary prior to the trade here. So never say never for these kind of deals, for what Bill Zito can make here coming up at the deadline. But those two players on the Flyers, Frost and maybe Cam York, are ones to look at, but highly doubtful that those trades would come to fruition for the Cats at the deadline. But we'll see that there. After the game, we will be providing you with a post-game reaction to the Panthers and the Flyers tonight from Wells Fargo Center on the first end of a back-to-back, right before they switch gears and head just a little up north, I-95, and head to New Jersey. So make sure to come back to tomorrow's edition of the show. We'll have this breakdown and more. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.